Money is often seen as the measure of success, but true wealth isn't counted in dollars. It's measured in choices, attention, time, and character. Psychology of wealth takes you on a journey beyond spreadsheets and stock tickers into the human side of finance, the emotions, decisions, and stories that shape our relationship with money and life itself. Through cinematic storytelling and behavioral science, this book reveals why wealth without understanding can leave us anxious, why attention and time are more valuable than gold, and how small, consistent actions in habits, character, and presence compound into lasting abundance. Using real-world anecdotes, scientific insights, and practical exercises, Psychology of Wealth teaches you to master not just your finances, but your mind, your choices, and your life. This isn't just about getting rich, it's about living rich. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Wealth. 1. Opening. The Mirage. We grow up chasing numbers that glow on screens. A promotion, a car, a balance that climbs by increments. Each feels like proof that we're moving somewhere important. But money is a peculiar mirror. It reflects less of who we are and more of what we fear. We don't want wealth. We want the feeling we imagine wealth will buy: security, admiration, peace. Yet when the number arrives, it rarely delivers the emotion attached to it. The mirage moves a few steps ahead. Every civilization has believed its currency could purchase contentment. Gold coins, shells, paper, data. Same pursuit, same illusion. The human brain didn't evolve for balance sheets. It evolved for belonging, safety, and storytelling. Money is merely the modern myth through which those ancient needs express themselves. 2. The dopamine trap of more. When a paycheck lands or an investment grows, a tiny surge of dopamine rewards us. It's the same chemical that fires when a hunter spots fruit in the forest. But dopamine isn't happiness, it's anticipation. It drives us forward, whispering, maybe the next milestone will finally feel like enough. That's the first illusion of wealth. The chase feels more alive than the catch. The markets, the sales targets, the upgrades, they keep the reward loop spinning. The mind confuses motion with meaning. Studies in behavioral economics show that after basic comfort, increases in income raise life satisfaction only slightly, yet our brains behave as if the next raise is salvation. Why? Because the neurochemical reward is tied not to having, but to expecting. To outsmart this loop, you don't need to stop desiring progress. You need to design pauses, deliberate moments of arrival. Otherwise, you'll sprint through victories like a traveler running past their own home. 3. The silent currency, time. Imagine two people. One earns $10,000 a week, but works 80 hours to get it. Another earns $1,000, but owns her mornings, her health, and her sunsets. Who is richer? Economists can debate the math, but life eventually votes for freedom. The ultimate unit of wealth is time you control. Every hour spent doing what aligns with your values compounds in invisible interest, clarity, peace, vitality. And like any investment, it grows slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day you realize you've built a fortune in moments, not money. That's the second illusion. We measure wealth in currency because it's countable, while time and peace are not. Yet those two, precisely because they're unmeasurable, are priceless. 4. The social mirror. Much of what we call ambition is simply comparison in disguise. A neighbor buys a new car, a friend posts a vacation, and the brain lights up with threat detection. We feel behind even when nothing in our lives has changed. Anthropologists suggest this comes from ancient survival instincts. In small tribes, falling behind the group could mean losing resources. Today, tribe has become the internet, and we are all perpetually behind someone. Wealth then becomes performance, a costume to reassure ourselves and others that we're safe, successful, admired. But genuine security is silent. The quiet rich don't need to broadcast. Their sense of worth is internal, self-funded. Whenever you feel envy's spark, pause and ask, if no one could see this purchase, would I still want it? That question alone has saved countless fortunes and countless minds. 5. The psychology of enough. The word enough is deceptively small. It is the invisible boundary between growth and greed. Crossing it doesn't happen in bank accounts. It happens in identity. Behavioral psychologist Dan Gilbert once noted that people are poor at predicting what will make them happy because we imagine future satisfaction in present emotions. We pictured the raise and feel thrilled, forgetting that our baseline of joy will soon reset. Realizing enough requires emotional literacy, the ability to notice when joy plateaus and compulsion begins. You can feel it, the moment ambition stops inspiring and starts exhausting. That's the signal that you've entered the illusion again. Write it somewhere visible. Enough is a decision, not a number. Every decision beyond that line trades serenity for status.
6. The invisible rich. The wealthiest people you meet might not look the part. They wear time on their faces instead of brands on their bodies. They collect memories, not trophies. Their accounts may be modest, yet their lives feel spacious. This isn't moral romanticism, it's neurological realism. Once basic needs and safety are met, happiness correlates less with income and more with autonomy, relationships, and purpose. The triad that neuroscientists call the well-being network. When you optimize life for those three, money becomes a tool, not a trap. You use it to buy options, not opinions. So if you ever wonder how wealthy someone is, don't ask what they own. Ask how they spend their mornings. 7. The cost of ignorance. Ignorance about one's own emotional patterns is expensive. Markets move, economies shift, but the greatest losses occur inside, in impulsive choices made under stress. Financial crises, both personal and global, often stem not from lack of information, but from excess of emotion. Fear sells faster than facts. Greed tweets louder than patience. But history rewards the calm. The investor who understands that volatility is temporary and temperament is destiny compounds not only money, but peace. In the long run, emotional discipline beats intellectual brilliance. Because wealth, at its core, is a behavioral game played inside your nervous system. 9. Reframing success. If you measure success solely by accumulation, you'll never win, because the scoreboard has no finish line. But if you measure it by alignment, how closely your daily actions match your values, you win instantly. This doesn't mean abandoning ambition, it means redefining it. Build wealth like an artist, not to impress, but to express. Create a portfolio that funds curiosity, generosity, and rest. Every financial plan should begin with a human plan. What kind of days do you want to live? What emotions do you want your money to protect? Design from that answer backward. 9. Be quiet revolution. Something subtle is happening around the world. People are beginning to equate minimalism with luxury. A smaller home, fewer commitments, simpler wardrobes. Not poverty, but precision. The new rich are those whose lives feel light. Psychologists call this value coherence, when your external life finally matches your internal values. It's rare because it requires both courage and clarity. But once achieved, you stop performing success and start living it. That's the true revolution, moving from money as identity to money as instrument. 10. Closing reflection. Seeing the illusion. Stand at the edge of your desires for a moment. Look at the things you chase, the next promotion, the next gadget, the next validation. Ask, what emotion am I really buying? Security? Admiration? Freedom? Love? Once you name it, you can earn it directly without the detour through endless consumption. That realization breaks the illusion. Because the illusion of wealth isn't that money can't buy happiness. Sometimes it can. The illusion is that it always must. True wealth is the calm that remains when the chase ends. It's waking up without dread, giving without calculation, resting without guilt. It's the quiet satisfaction of knowing that if tomorrow came empty-handed, you'd still feel full. End of Chapter 1. The Illusion of Wealth.
Chapter 2. Time, Not Things. 1. The Unseen Exchange. Every day you trade something invisible. When you agree to a meeting you don't want, scroll for an hour you'll never remember, or chase one more client because it's just good business, you're spending the only currency that can't be earned back: time. Money renews itself, energy can be replenished, but time is a one-direction transaction. Every purchase is permanent. The tragedy is that most of us don't even know the price we're paying. 2. The Collector of Hours. There's a story about a man named Otto, a Karachi architect who once told his interns, "I don't collect projects anymore, I collect mornings." In his 30s, Otto built skyscrapers that scraped both sky and sanity. He earned more than he ever thought possible, but was always too tired to enjoy it. One day, his 5-year-old son asked, "Baba, do you sleep at the office?" That single question cracked the illusion. Within a year, Otto closed his firm, took half the income, and redesigned his life instead of buildings. He began each day with a walk by the sea. Clients whispered that he'd given up, but Otto smiled. "I'm finally rich. I just changed the unit of measure." Psychologists would call what he did reframing, a cognitive pivot that rewires the reward system. He stopped chasing external validation and linked his dopamine hits to presence, not profit. 3. Why time feels poorer than money. Neuroscience gives us an odd truth. We perceive time emotionally, not objectively. 1 hour spent in flow feels shorter than 1 hour spent in traffic. That's because time is filtered through attention. In a famous Princeton study, people who tracked their moments instead of their money reported higher life satisfaction even when their incomes were lower. Attention, not assets, predicted happiness. Yet modern culture trains the opposite. We hoard money and squander hours, believing one can replace the other. But every later you promise yourself quietly expires while you're busy earning it. 4. The first million myth. A mentor once told me, "Your first million buys your freedom." Years later, I realized the correction, "Your first free hour buys it." A woman named Lydia, a software executive in London, proved the point. At 40, she'd accumulated the symbols, loft, car, savings, but confessed she was living on borrowed minutes. So she ran an experiment. One Friday every month, she refused to schedule anything. No meetings, no email. She called it her freedom dividend. The first few Fridays felt indulgent. Then they felt sacred. Eventually, she guarded them like capital. When asked if she'd ever go back to a full calendar, she said, "Why would I sell my best assets so cheaply?" Economists might label that a non-monetary return on investment. Psychologists call it temporal autonomy, the sense that you govern your own hours. Data from Harvard's well-being studies show that autonomy predicts happiness more strongly than wealth, intelligence, or even health. 5. The economy of attention. Technology promised to free our time. Instead, it auctioned it. Every ping and scroll fractures focus, the brain's most limited resource. We measure productivity in clicks, forgetting that attention is the true GDP of consciousness. A Stanford experiment found that heavy multitaskers actually lose efficiency. Their prefrontal cortex lights up like emergency sirens, wasting glucose and dopamine. Translation, the more you chase speed, the slower your mind becomes. The wealthiest people of the next decade won't be those who own the most assets. They'll be those who own the least distraction. So try this micro habit. Before saying yes to anything, ask, would I still agree if it cost an hour of my life? Because it does, every time. 6. The paradox of convenience. We built machines to save time, and then used the saved time to build more machines. Laundry cycles shrank, emails flew faster, food arrived in minutes, yet surveys show we feel busier than ever. Economists call it the paradox of convenience. As tasks become easier, expectations expand. What used to be a letter becomes 5 instant messages. What used to be 1 meeting becomes 3 video calls. Convenience doesn't create freedom unless paired with boundaries. Without them, efficiency just tightens the treadmill. Freedom isn't having nothing to do. It's having the choice of when to do it. 7. Compounding in hours. We know compound interest builds fortunes, but there's also compound presence, the exponential gain from consistent small moments of calm. Take Ravi, a mid-level engineer who left his phone in another room for the first 10 minutes each morning. 10 minutes seemed trivial, yet within weeks he reported better focus and lower anxiety. That's behavioral finance at a cellular level. He redirected his morning attention, the seed capital of the day, into stillness. Over years, the interest of those quiet minutes accumulated into creativity, better work, and deeper relationships. In investment terms, he diversified out of noise.
8. The fear of stillness. Ask people why they stay busy, and they'll often say, "I just have a lot to do." Ask a little deeper and you'll hear the truth. Stillness feels dangerous. It exposes the gap between activity and meaning. Psychologists describe a phenomenon called existential avoidance. We fill our schedules to avoid our thoughts. The busier we appear, the less we must confront the question, am I using my time well? But growth begins precisely in that silence. Like financial audits, life audits require pausing long enough to see the numbers that matter. Try sitting without input for 5 minutes. You'll feel the withdrawal of dopamine at first, a craving to check, to move, to fill. Then, slowly, a second wave arrives. Clarity. That's the mind regaining ownership of itself. 9. Redefining the dividend. What if you treated each free hour like a dividend check? Would you squander it on noise or reinvest it in wonder? Time, unlike money, compounds through attention, not interest. Spend it on what nourishes family, learning, health, and its yield multiplies through meaning. Spend it on envy and distraction, and it depreciates instantly. Economists track inflation, philosophers track purpose. Only one of them can make an afternoon feel longer. 10. The ledger of a life. Imagine opening a balance sheet not of cash, but of minutes. On the left, hours sold, moments forgotten, sleep deferred. On the right, mornings reclaimed, laughter unpriced, sunsets unhurried. Which side is growing faster? If the numbers disturb you, good. That discomfort is awareness, the prelude to change. Remember Adil, Lydia, Ravi, the quiet millionaires of time. They didn't renounce ambition, they recalibrated it. They discovered that the richest days are often the least eventful. In the end, the ledger of a life balances differently than any spreadsheet. Profit is peace, loss is regret. And the final audit doesn't ask what you earned, it asks what you experienced. We chase things thinking they'll buy us time, but the wisest spend time as if it were already the treasure, because it is. End of Chapter 2. Time, not things. Chapter 3. The myth of more. 1. The hungry circuit. If you could peek inside the human brain when someone anticipates a reward, a sale closed, a like received, a bonus announced, you'd see a tiny flash of light in the nucleus accumbens, the brain's reward hub. That spark is dopamine, the messenger of almost. It doesn't celebrate the reward, it celebrates its possibility. Evolution wired us this way so we'd keep hunting after the last berry was eaten. But in a world of infinite berries, notifications, upgrades, new goals, our dopamine loop never rests. We live in constant anticipation, mistaking the thrill of pursuit for the warmth of fulfillment. That's the myth of more, the belief that satisfaction lies just beyond the current horizon, that another zero, another follower, another purchase will finally close the gap. Yet the gap only widens. 2. The experiment of endless choice. Psychologist Barry Schwartz once placed shoppers before a wall of 24 jam flavors and found that abundance paralyzed them. People who faced only 6 choices or 10 times likelier to buy and happier afterward. The data said what our ancestors already knew. More options don't free us, they freeze us. The brain treats overchoice as threat detection. The prefrontal cortex floods with what-ifs, and contentment collapses under comparison. Modern finance amplifies that noise. 20 investments, 10 side hustles, 1,000 ways to spend, save, or show off. Each decision promises possibility, and each drains peace. In behavioral economics, this is called the paradox of choice, but emotionally it's simpler. When everything is possible, nothing feels enough. 3. The hedge fund illusion. Consider Daniel, a hedge fund manager who doubled his net worth every few years. To outsiders, he was a marvel of success. Yet one evening over dinner, he confessed something that sounded almost like grief. I'm trapped in escalation. Every number becomes normal. He described how his first million felt like triumph, the second like security, the third like pressure. He wasn't chasing greed, he said, he was chasing sensation. The emotional high of the first win had faded, so he raised the stakes to feel it again. Neurologically, Daniel was reenacting an addiction loop. Each success dulled his receptors, requiring a bigger victory to trigger the same dopamine rush. His wealth soared, his satisfaction flatlined. When he finally stepped back, selling part of the fund and moving to a quieter life, he told his colleagues, "I realized I wasn't compounding money, I was compounding craving."
4. Relative riches. Behavioral scientists call this social comparison theory. We judge our success not by absolutes, but by proximity, how we rank next to others. The same salary that feels abundant among friends can feel inadequate in a wealthier circle. Neuroscience confirms it. In MRI scans, the reward centers light up when we outperform peers more than when we simply gain. Our brains prefer winning to having. That's why the myth of more survives every paycheck. It's social, not rational. As soon as we reach one rung, we look sideways, not inward. Marketing exploits this perfectly. Luxury ads rarely describe quality, they sell status. They whisper, "You deserve better than them." And the moment we believe it, we enter the loop again, consuming identity instead of joy. 5. The set point trap. Happiness researchers speak of a hedonic set point, an emotional baseline to which we return after positive or negative events. Lottery winners spike in joy, but within a year, their average mood resembles their pre-win state. This adaptation is not failure, it's survival. If constant euphoria persisted, we'd stop striving. But in a consumer society, that adaptive feature becomes a bug. We keep increasing income or possessions to recapture a feeling that our biology has already normalized away. Economist Richard Easterlin charted this decades ago. National incomes rose while self-reported happiness flatlined. His conclusion was blunt. Beyond comfort, money buys less joy than expected. Yet, the myth persists, precisely because it's profitable. Entire industries rely on our inability to notice that our expectations, not our earnings, keep moving. 6. The curve of diminishing returns. Every pleasure has a saturation point. The first bite of cake delights. The fifth numbs. The first luxury purchase thrills. The 10th becomes maintenance. Economists call this the law of diminishing marginal utility. Each additional unit yields less satisfaction than the one before. But the brain doesn't record utility, it records novelty. So instead of stopping at enough, we escalate to different. New car, new phone, new destination. Novelty resets dopamine temporarily, but the underlying hunger remains. The wise learn to locate novelty inside, not outside, to cultivate curiosity rather than consumption. The unwise chase stimulation until peace feels boring. 7. The gratitude recalibration. Psychologists have discovered a deceptively simple antidote to the more instinct: deliberate gratitude. Not the casual thanks we toss out of habit, but structured appreciation, writing down 3 specific things each day that already exist. Neural imaging shows that consistent gratitude practice increases activity in the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, the same region that quiets craving. In other words, noticing what's already good rewires the brain away from next. Consider Maria, a freelance designer who once kept a list titled, "When I Finally Make It." It included a downtown apartment, a design award, and a year of fully booked clients. By her mid-30s, she had checked every box and felt nothing. Her mentor challenged her to keep a new list, things I can enjoy today without earning more. It began with coffee before sunrise and my nephew's laughter through a video call. Within weeks, she reported fewer compulsive urges to refresh her earnings dashboard. The data of her life hadn't changed, only its interpretation. Gratitude didn't increase her wealth, it increased her access to it. 8. The delay principle. Another behavioral lever is delayed reward. In the 1970s marshmallow experiment, children who resisted immediate candy later showed higher life success scores. But modern neuroscientists have refined the lesson. It's not the delay itself, it's the ability to imagine a richer future vividly enough to compete with present temptation. Our dopamine system responds to mental simulation almost as strongly as to real experience. So when you visualize the calm of debt freedom or the relief of leaving work early to play with your kids, your brain receives a small taste of that reward now, helping you postpone shallow ones. Smart investors use the same trick financially. Emotionally intelligent people use it psychologically. They invest imagination ahead of consumption. 9. Enoughness as strategy. Economists measure optimization. Sages measure sufficiency. But both rely on the same insight. Every system performs best within limits. Human well-being follows an inverted U-curve. Too little income brings stress. But beyond a threshold, extra resources add complexity faster than comfort. Behavioral scientist Elizabeth Dunn found that people who gave away small portions of their income experienced more lasting happiness than those who spent it on themselves. The act of giving converts surplus into meaning, neutralizing the itch for more. We see this in Arjun, a mid-career surgeon who began donating 1 day a week to a free clinic. He called it his emotional rebalancing. After months, he noticed his spending cravings drop dramatically. The clinic didn't make him poorer. It made his rewards internal. When you define enough quantitatively, it moves. When you define it qualitatively, enough connection, enough rest, enough curiosity, it stabilizes. 10. The mirror test. At some point, every achiever faces a quiet audit, standing before the mirror asking, "Who am I without my goals?" Those who answer easily are free. Those who can't are enslaved by the myth of more. Sociologists describe identity foreclosure, when success becomes the sole definition of self. It's risky because any disruption, a market crash, a job loss, aging, feels like annihilation. That's why cultivating roles beyond earning, friend, learner, wanderer, parent, artist, protects emotional wealth. Diversify your identity as you diversify your portfolio. The mirror test isn't moral, it's neurological. The broader your self-concept, the more resilient your brain's reward network becomes. 11. Reclaiming wonder. Children marvel at puddles, leaves, stars, unmonetized joy. Adults outsource wonder to luxury. Yet wonder, biologically, is free dopamine paired with awe. It resets the stress response and expands perception of time. Take a walk without earbuds. Notice how 10 quiet minutes feel longer than an hour online. You just extended your subjective lifespan without earning a cent. Neuroscientists call it time dilation through mindfulness. Poets simply call it living. 12. The equation reversed. So here's the counter formula to the myth of more. Contentment equals expectations divided by reality. When expectations rise faster than reality, the quotient shrinks. You feel poor amid plenty. Lower or stabilize expectations, and contentment expands immediately, even if nothing else changes. That's not resignation, it's arithmetic. History's wisest understood this math instinctively. Stoic philosophers practice premeditation malorum, imagining loss to appreciate presence. Behavioral therapy now mirrors the same exercise under a different name, negative visualization. By briefly picturing absence, you intensify gratitude for what remains. 13. Closing reflection. We live in an economy that profits from your discontent. But there's a deeper market, one that trades in calm, in focus, in hours fully owned. Its currency is awareness. Its interest rate, peace. Next time the urge for more rises, try this mental audit. Is this desire expanding my freedom or my maintenance? Will this upgrade add hours or obligations? Am I chasing joy or am I chasing the memory of a previous high? Answer honestly and the spell breaks. The myth of more ends not with poverty, but with perspective. When you realize that the richest moments require no purchase, accumulation loses its charm. Enoughness isn't the ceiling of ambition, it's the floor of peace. End of Chapter 3, The Myth of More.
Chapter 4. The Story You Tell Yourself. 1. The Invisible Script. Every person lives by a story about money, a script written long before they were conscious of holding a pen. Some grew up in homes where money was a whisper, others where it was a shout. For some, it symbolized safety, for others, control. The behavioral scientist Dr. Brad Klontz calls these money scripts, subconscious beliefs formed by childhood experiences. They shape how we spend, save, and even self-sabotage. You can have a PhD in finance and still be ruled by a 6-year-old's fear of scarcity. We rarely update that script. We inherit the plot from parents, culture, and crisis, and then defend it for life, as if altering it would erase who we are. But here's the quiet truth. Your financial story is not a fact. It's a narrative your nervous system repeats because it once kept you safe. 2. The child in the boardroom. Take Elena, a high-performing executive who earned 7 figures yet panicked whenever her savings dipped below a specific number, $100,000. It wasn't rational. She could replenish it in weeks, but that number represented something sacred. When she explored her past with a therapist, she remembered watching her parents lose their home during a recession. They'd whispered late at night, arguing about falling below $100,000. That phrase etched into her amygdala, the brain's fear center, as survival code. Decades later, Elena's adult self wore tailored suits and made strategic decisions, but her financial brain was still run by a frightened child counting dollars under the blanket. Behavioral finance often forgets this. Our money habits are rarely about math. They're about memory. Until you identify which version of you is making the decision, you can't rewrite the story. 3. The scarcity lens. Scarcity is not just the absence of money, it's the presence of fear. Psychologist Sinhil Mulanathan and Elder Shafir found that even temporary scarcity of time, food, or funds narrows the mind's focus. It hijacks attention, reducing long-term planning and amplifying short-term survival. When you live under the scarcity lens, every expense feels like a loss, and every opportunity feels like a threat. You stop investing in future gain because your brain keeps screaming, just make it through today. Ironically, this is how poverty sustains itself, not just economically, but mentally. You begin living as if the universe is shrinking around you. The antidote isn't abundance, it's awareness. Once you see scarcity as a state of mind, not a permanent condition, you regain agency. 4. The narrative fallacy. Humans crave meaning, not data. So we turn random financial outcomes into stories of destiny or disaster. If a risky investment pays off, we call ourselves brilliant. If it fails, we call ourselves cursed. Yet often, it's neither. It's variance, the chaotic rhythm of chance. The writer and statistician Nassim Taleb Nicholas calls this the narrative fallacy, our brain's obsession with crafting a cause and effect story even when one doesn't exist. We do this to protect our ego. Randomness feels intolerable, but the danger is that we start believing the story more than the reality. You didn't fail because the universe is against you. You failed because risk has teeth, and that's okay. Detaching self-worth from outcomes is the first step towards financial peace. You are not your wins or losses. You are the author of how you interpret them.
5. The money mirror. Money doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you already were when given options. That's why two people can inherit the same fortune and tell two opposite stories, one of liberation, one of fear. In behavioral science, this is called projection bias, the tendency to imagine future satisfaction using present emotions. If you're anxious now, you'll imagine wealth as anxiety in a larger house. So when you say, if I just had more money, I'd be happy, you're not forecasting reality. You're amplifying your current mindset. Wealth magnifies what's inside you. If you're grounded, it expands generosity. If you're restless, it fuels restlessness. If you're lost, it buys you more places to wander. Before you earn more, fix the story of what enough means. Otherwise, more zeros just add volume to the same noise. 6. The comparison trap. Money stories are rarely written in isolation. They're co-authored by our culture. The psychologist Leon Festinger showed that humans measure themselves not by absolutes, but by comparison. You can feel rich until you scroll social media. Comparison doesn't require envy, only proximity. We compare most to those slightly ahead of us. A co-worker's promotion stings more than a billionaire's yacht. Why? Because it feels possible and therefore personal. Each scroll subtly edits our self-narrative. They're winning, I'm behind. That sentence repeated enough becomes identity. But here's the science. Social comparison lights up the same neural circuits as physical pain. That means your envy isn't moral weakness. It's neurological self-harm. The cure isn't to stop noticing others. It's to change your reference point. Progress, not peers, should define your plotline. 7. The reframe technique. Psychologists use a tool called cognitive reframing, changing the story, not the facts. Example, instead of I failed that business, reframe as that business taught me how I handle uncertainty. Same event, new narrative, drastically different neurochemical response. Each reframe releases serotonin and calms the limbic system, replacing panic with possibility. It's emotional alchemy, transforming loss into learning, guilt into guidance. So the next time you face financial regret, ask, if I were the narrator of a film about my life, what would this scene teach the audience? Instantly, you shift from victim to author. And authors don't get trapped inside their chapters. 9. The rewrite. So, how do you rewrite a lifelong money story? Step 1, name it. Write down the phrases you heard about money growing up. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people are greedy. We can't afford that. Each line is a fossilized belief. Identify it, and you start breaking its spell. Step 2, challenge it. Ask, is this always true, or was it true for someone once? Beliefs can expire. Most of ours just never got audited. Step 3, replace it. Create new affirmations rooted in autonomy, not fear. I respect money, but it doesn't define me. I create options, not anxiety. I can be both secure and generous. Neuroscience shows that repetition rewires neural pathways. Your new sentences literally build new circuits. The brain's story engine updates through practice, not insight. 10. The inner economy. Your relationship with money mirrors your relationship with time, control, and trust. If you hoard one, you probably hoard the others. If you overspend one, you likely overspend all. Imagine your emotions as currencies: attention, love, patience. How do you spend them? Do you invest in depth or scatter across distractions? The richest people are often those who manage invisible currencies wisely. Because true wealth isn't accumulation, it's alignment. When your spending, savings, and values tell the same story, your life feels coherent. 11. The story you choose. There's a moment, quiet, ordinary, when you realize you're not the voice in your head, you're the one listening to it. That's the moment you reclaim authorship. From then on, every decision becomes a sentence in your new story. A purchase says, "This matters." A pause says, "I'm choosing peace." A boundary says, "I'm rewriting legacy." Behavioral change isn't about force, it's about narrative shift. Once you change the story, the behavior follows like a loyal character fulfilling a better plot. 12. Closing reflection. You were born into someone else's money story, shaped by scarcity, fear, or ambition, but you don't have to die in it. The power of money lies not in numbers, but in the meaning you assign them. And meaning can be rewritten at any age. So tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself, what story am I telling about my worth, and does it still serve me? If the answer is no, smile, because that awareness means you've already begun chapter 2 of your life, authored by intention, not inheritance. End of chapter 4. The story you tell yourself. Chapter 5. The cost of control. 1. The illusion of the levers. Human beings are the only creatures who believe that prediction equals protection. We invent calendars, budgets, forecasts, apps, tiny levers to tame uncertainty. We build fences around time and call it order. Yet beneath every spreadsheet hums the same unease. Life will not obey. Neuroscientists call this the prediction error response, the jolt we feel when reality diverges from expectation. A delay to flight, a falling stock, a diagnosis. The brain fires the same alarm it once used for predators. We try to silence that alarm with data, but data was never the real medicine. Certainty was. Control is the modern opiate. We crave it because unpredictability once meant extinction. But in an era of abundance, that instinct costs more peace than it saves. 2. The trader's tremor. Michael, a currency trader, used to monitor markets 20 hours a day. He slept beside glowing screens, heart pounding with every tick. When profits came, he called it mastery. When losses hit, he called it anomaly. Both interpretations served the same addiction, the illusion that he could outthink chaos. After a breakdown, heart arrhythmia at 39, his doctor told him bluntly, "Your body thinks you're sprinting from a tiger that never leaves." Physiologically, she was right. Continuous control attempts flood the system with cortisol and adrenaline. The autonomic nervous system never resets. Michael sold half his portfolio, began journaling instead of trading through panic, and noticed something strange. His performance improved precisely when his grip loosened. Behavioral economics call this over-control bias, the tendency to mistake effort for influence. Sometimes doing less is the highest form of strategy. 3. The biology of uncertainty. In the brain's hierarchy, certainty equals safety. When outcomes feel predictable, the amygdala quiets and the prefrontal cortex, seat of reasoning, lights up. But when uncertainty rises, the amygdala hijacks the system, narrowing focus to immediate threat. That's why anxious investors sell too soon, why perfectionists overplan, why parents overprotect. The brain would rather be wrong with confidence than right with doubt. The irony, progress requires the very state our biology resists: uncertainty. Innovation, love, art, and entrepreneurship all demand surrender to variables we can't control. The cost of control, then, is possibility itself. 4. The paradox of the pilot. During flight training simulations, instructors measure grip strength. Novices clutch the yoke until their hands shake. Veterans hold it lightly, fingers resting rather than clamping. When turbulence hits, the rigid pilot overcorrects. The relaxed pilot rides the motion until equilibrium returns. Life functions the same way. Tight control amplifies oscillation. Relaxed attention stabilizes it. Psychologists call this psychological flexibility, the ability to adjust behavior when reality changes. It predicts resilience better than IQ or wealth. The paradox: true control emerges only after we stop fighting for it. 5. The parent and the path. Sarah, a mother of 2, saved obsessively for her children's education. Every choice, vacations, dinners out, ran through the filter of their future security. When her oldest, Noah, announced he wanted to become a musician, she froze. The spreadsheets had never included that variable. Months of tension followed until she realized her fear wasn't about money, it was about identity. She had built her worth around being the provider. Control was her love language. When she finally released it, supporting Noah's path instead of editing it, something shifted. Their relationship deepened, and, ironically, her own anxiety about finances lessened. Control felt like care, but it was really containment. 6. The stress dividend. Every control strategy carries an invisible tax: stress. A study at Stanford found that people with high intolerance of uncertainty experience elevated blood pressure and lower immune function even when life circumstances are stable. Their bodies react as if crisis is perpetual. Stress, unspent, becomes interest on emotional debt. The more we monitor, micromanage, and anticipate, the more we compound that debt, paying peace in installments. The counter strategy isn't chaos, it's trust calibration, choosing specific zones to relinquish. You can't let go of everything, but you can decide which levers are illusions. 7. The zone of influence. Cognitive behavioral therapy teaches a simple triad: things you control, effort, attitude, routine. Things you influence, relationships, teamwork, preparation. Things you can't control, outcomes, timing, other people's minds. Most suffering arises from misplacing energy into column 3. When clients learn to reallocate effort toward column 1, anxiety drops dramatically. The brain's threat circuits quiet because agency, even partial, restores safety. This is not surrender, it's efficient realism. 8. The myth of master plans. Finance books idolize 5-year plans, but history rarely cooperates. Economies shift, health changes, wars erupt. In behavioral forecasting, this is known as the planning fallacy, our tendency to underestimate unpredictability and overestimate personal foresight. Plans are useful scaffolds, not sacred scripts. The healthiest planners design flexible architectures, savings with liquidity, goals with grace. A good life plan should resemble jazz, structure guided by improvisation. 9. The spiritual economics of surrender. Every major wisdom tradition teaches what modern neuroscience now proves. Surrender lowers cognitive load. Meditators show reduced activity in the default mode network, the part of the brain that obsesses over control. Athletes call the same phenomenon flow. In both cases, mastery comes not from micromanagement, but from merging with the process. When you stop fighting uncertainty, the mind reallocates energy to creativity and insight. That's why breakthroughs often happen in showers, walks, or moments of release. Surrender isn't passivity, it's alignment with complexity. 10. The CEO and the River. A story from Kyoto. A retired CEO spent decades steering a multinational company. After stepping down, he began painting rivers, always from the same bridge. A journalist once asked why. He smiled. Running a company felt like trying to steer the water. Painting it taught me I never could. I only shaped my own posture on the bridge. His lesson echoed what behavioral scientists call locus of control reorientation, shifting from external dominance to internal adaptability. You cannot command the river. You can learn to stand beautifully within it. 11. The freedom equation. Freedom equals control minus attachment. The more control you seek from fear, the more freedom you lose. But when control arises from clarity, knowing what truly matters, it liberates. Financially, this looks like automation over obsession, boundaries over micromanagement. Emotionally, it means trusting process over panic. The wise build systems that run without constant supervision, freeing attention for life itself. 12. Closing reflection. Maybe the greatest wealth isn't mastery over outcomes, but serenity within uncertainty. The market will move, people will surprise you, and tomorrow will remain untamed. Yet peace is still purchasable, paid for with one choice, to release what was never yours to hold. So tonight, before you sleep, ask gently, which levers am I gripping that were never mine? Loosen them. Watch how your mind exhales. Control is expensive. Freedom is the refund.
End of Chapter 5. The Cost of Control. Chapter 6. The Paradox of Luck. 1. The Unseen Hand. Luck. The word we use when cause meets mystery. It's the invisible co-author of every success story, though few are humble enough to name it in the credits. Behavioral scientists call this outcome bias, our tendency to judge decisions by results rather than reasoning. When things go well, we credit skill. When they collapse, we blame fate. The truth lives somewhere between. You can be brilliant and still lose to randomness. You can be reckless and still rise by timing. The world is not a spreadsheet. It's a storm of probabilities. The paradox of luck is that it rewards humility, yet most people only learn humility after luck has already turned. 2. The lottery of birth. Start anywhere in the world and trace a line backward. Your birthplace, your parents, your era, your passport, your genes. None were chosen by you, yet all determine much of what you call achievement. Economist Robert Frank calls this the moral blind spot of meritocracy. We like to believe success is earned, but the distribution of opportunity is as uneven as weather. Consider Daniel Kahneman's insight. Success equals talent plus luck. Great success equals a little more talent plus a lot more luck. It doesn't diminish hard work, it contextualizes it. The race was never fair, but it can still be honorable. When you accept that, gratitude replaces arrogance, and empathy replaces envy. 3. Survivorship bias. History loves winners. So do social feeds, documentaries, and keynote stages. But what we rarely see are the thousands who tried the same strategies and vanished quietly. This is survivorship bias, the illusion that visible success proves a formula, when it might only prove persistence plus probability. For every startup that became a unicorn, thousands died in silence. For every investor who timed the market perfectly, 1 million guessed wrong. We forget that luck leaves no footprints, only success does. And so, we imitate survivors instead of studying the fallen, learning too little from failure because it lacks spotlight. 4. The coin toss. A behavioral study once asked participants to flip a coin 100 times and record results. Many quietly adjusted the data to match intuition because humans hate randomness. We're meaning-making creatures. Chaos unsettles us, so we invent patterns. Every third flip is heads. I'm due for a win. Gamblers call it the hot hand fallacy, believing success streaks mean mastery when they might just be statistical noise. Investors, too, mistake a bull run for brilliance. The coin doesn't know who you are, but you will always try to make it personal. 5. The CEO's confession. A well-known CEO once admitted that the company's pivotal moment, the one that made billions, came from a shipping error. A container of their new product was misrouted to a small city where it sold out by accident. That buzz led to national demand. He told this story at a leadership summit and ended with the sentence that hung in the air. We were lucky, but we were ready. That's the subtle truth of success. Luck favors motion. You can't schedule serendipity, but you can build enough momentum to collide with it. Behavioral scientist Richard Weissman calls this the luck mindset, not mystical, but probabilistic. People who are open, curious, and socially connected encounter more lucky breaks simply because they increase surface area for chance. Luck, then, isn't found, it's invited. 6. The brain's story of fortune. Neuroscience offers another angle. When something good happens unexpectedly, the brain releases a surge of dopamine, the chemical of reward prediction error. In that instant, your mind labels the event as lucky because it violated expectation in your favor. But the same mechanism punishes you for misfortune. Negative surprises drop dopamine, amplifying fear and regret. That's why one stroke of bad luck can overshadow 10 neutral days. The brain treats unpredictability as emotional turbulence. Understanding this doesn't make us immune, but it helps us respond rationally. Fortune swings are biological storms. Don't build your self-worth on their weather. 7. The farmer's wisdom. An old Taoist parable tells of a farmer whose horse runs away. His neighbors say, "Such bad luck." He shrugs, "Maybe." Days later, the horse returns with 3 wild horses. The neighbors cheer, "What good luck." Again he says, "Maybe." His son tries to tame one, falls, and breaks his leg. Terrible luck, they cry. Maybe, says the farmer. Weeks later, soldiers arrive, conscripting every able young man, except his injured son. The moral isn't apathy, it's perspective. The line between good and bad luck is rarely visible in real time. 8. The psychology of fairness. Humans crave fairness more than food. In one experiment, participants were asked to split $100. When the proposer offered less than $30, many receivers rejected it, preferring to earn nothing than accept unfairness. Our brains treat unfair luck as moral violation, even when it's just math. This is why people despise losing to chance, not for the loss itself, but for the absence of justice. Why me is the mind's rebellion against randomness. Yet, once we accept that life's dice are loaded by mystery, we stop fighting the dealer and start playing the game with grace. 9. The skill-luck spectrum. Think of every pursuit as a blend of skill and luck. At chess, skill dominates. At roulette, luck does. Most of life sits in the gray middle: investing, careers, relationships, timing. The wise distinguish between process quality and result quality. You can make a brilliant decision and still lose, or a foolish one and win. Investor Annie Duke calls this resulting bias, the habit of equating outcomes with intelligence. True mastery means detaching judgment from outcome and focusing on process integrity. Control the controllable. Respect the uncontrollable. That's how you partner with luck instead of fighting it. 10. The fallacy of deservedness. Modern culture teaches that success must be deserved, that every winner earned it, every loser failed to try. But behavioral science dismantles that myth. Experiments on random reinforcement show that even pigeons develop rituals when rewarded by chance, a kind of superstitious dance, believing behavior caused luck. Humans do the same with affirmations, routines, or mantras that once preceded success. We confuse correlation with causation because it gives chaos meaning. But meaning built on false certainty is fragile. Maturity is realizing you can influence your odds without owning the outcome. 11. Gratitude without credit. When you understand luck's role, gratitude changes flavor. It's no longer performance for the divine. It's awareness of the improbable. You begin to see how many near misses could have altered your path. The teacher who noticed you, the friend who made an introduction, the health you didn't lose. Luck humbles. Gratitude steadies. Together, they dissolve entitlement. The philosopher Seneca said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." But perhaps it's also what happens when ego meets surrender. 12. The currency of randomness. In markets, randomness creates volatility. In life, it creates story. A completely predictable existence would be safe, but sterile. No serendipitous meetings, no creative leaps, no accidents that turn into destiny. So maybe the goal isn't to eliminate luck, but to build systems that survive its extremes, what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility. Structures that grow stronger from disorder. Emotionally, anti-fragility looks like curiosity instead of control, flexibility instead of fear. You don't resist uncertainty, you metabolize it. 13. Closing reflection. Luck, like weather, will always change, but wisdom is learning to dress for the season, not curse the clouds. So when fortune smiles, don't boast. When it turns, don't despair. Ask instead, what can I learn from the swing? What stays stable inside me even when the dice roll against me? Because the richest people aren't those who escape luck, they're those who respect it. They dance with chance, not demand choreography. And in that dance, humility becomes grace, and gratitude becomes wealth. End of Chapter 6. The Paradox of Luck. Chapter 7. The Price of Attention. 1. The currency you don't notice. Attention is the oldest currency in the world, older than gold, older than paper, even older than trade itself. Before money, humans bartered with focus. What you notice shaped what survived. Today, we still trade that same currency, only now everyone is bidding for it. Every screen, headline, and notification fights to occupy the most valuable square inch of your brain, the space between stimulus and choice. We talk about time as our scarcest resource, but it isn't. Time passes whether or not we use it well. Attention, however, decides whether time becomes memory or noise. 2. The economics of distraction. In the digital economy, you are not the customer. You are the product. Platforms don't sell information, they sell attention. They monetize the microseconds you spend pausing over a photo or headline. Behavioral scientists call this variable reward scheduling, the same mechanism used in slot machines. You scroll not because you find what you want, but because the next scroll might bring it. The uncertainty itself keeps you hooked. Every ping is a dopamine prediction trigger. Every like or comment is a tiny payout. But what feels like reward is often just stimulation, a neurological mirage that leaves the brain craving more and remembering less.
3. The attention wealth paradox. Money buys options. Attention decides which options you notice. A person can be rich in assets, yet bankrupt in awareness, scrolling through luxury while missing life. Another can be financially modest, but present enough to notice the light shifting across a loved one's face, and in that moment, feel wealth no bank could store. Neuroscience calls this attentional saturation, when constant novelty dulls emotional sensitivity. The more stimuli you chase, the less depth you experience. True abundance isn't about having more to see, it's about seeing more in what you have. 4. The experiment of presence. At Harvard, researchers Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert ran a study tracking thousands of people through daily life. They discovered something stunning. People's minds wandered nearly 47% of the time, and the more their minds wandered, the less happy they felt. Even when daydreaming about pleasant things, participants reported lower well-being than when focused on a neutral task. The conclusion was simple, almost ancient. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind. Attention, then, isn't just productivity, it's peace. To attend fully to what is, rather than what could be, is the closest the mind comes to rest. 5. The investor's blind spot. Aaron, a portfolio manager, once tracked every news alert, tweet, and price shift during trading hours. His logic was sound: more data equals better decisions. But after a year of obsessive monitoring, his returns fell. Why? Because constant attention to noise distorted his sense of signal. He mistook availability for importance. Behavioral economists call this salience bias, the brain's tendency to overvalue what's vivid and recent while ignoring what's stable and slow. When Aaron began checking prices only once per day, his decisions improved. He regained context, and with it, calm. Attention, like capital, compounds best when invested deliberately. 6. The neuroscience of focus. The prefrontal cortex, our center for attention and planning, functions like a muscle. Every distraction drains glucose and oxygen. When you multitask,
answering emails while watching the market, replying to texts mid-meeting, you aren't dividing attention, you're fragmenting it. Each switch triggers a small refocus cost, adding cognitive fatigue. Psychologists call this attentional residue, the lingering mental echo from unfinished tasks. Over time, it blurs clarity, erodes patience, and shortens emotional fuse. Focus, like wealth, isn't about quantity, it's about concentration. 7. The cost of constant input. In a world of infinite noise, silence has become a luxury good. We carry devices that never stop whispering our names, each alert a micro tax on consciousness. A 2022 MIT study showed that after every interruption, it takes the average person 23 minutes to regain full focus. That means 1 hour of deep work can vanish into 4 shallow ones simply because we pay attention to what doesn't deserve it. The world profits from your distraction. Your peace profits from your discipline.
8. The filter and the lens. Attention doesn't just select what we see, it shapes how we interpret it. When you're angry, you notice threats. When you're grateful, you notice gifts. The mind isn't a camera. It's a lens that develops reality according to emotion. Cognitive psychology calls this attentional bias, our tendency to seek confirmation of what we already feel. That's why scarcity thinkers spot competition everywhere, and abundance thinkers see collaboration. Both live in the same world, but their attention sculpts opposite universes. If you want to change your life, change your focus. 9. The mind as portfolio. Imagine your attention as an investment portfolio. Each hour, you allocate units of focus toward people, projects, or distractions. Some pay steady dividends: relationships, learning, creativity. Others promise quick returns but depreciate fast: gossip, comparison, outrage. The market of your mind is volatile. But over a lifetime, the highest compounders are always presence, curiosity, and gratitude. Warren Buffett once said, "The most dangerous distractions are the ones you love but don't love you back." That's true not only of stocks, but of thoughts. 11. The discipline of ignoring. Focus isn't only about what you attend to, it's about what you refuse to attend to. The Stoics call this apatheia, not apathy, but disciplined indifference to what doesn't serve virtue or clarity. You can't fight distraction by fighting every distraction. You fight it by starving it of fuel, removing cues, silencing notifications, creating friction between impulse and action. Silence is not the absence of sound. It's the absence of compulsion. Attention thrives where hurry dies. 12. The attention economy within. Even internally, your thoughts compete like advertisers. Regret flashes old campaigns. Fear runs new ones. Desire interrupts with limited time offers. Meditation in its purest form isn't mysticism. It's market regulation. It teaches you to notice which thoughts deserve budget and which are clickbait. Every inhale, a reset. Every exhale, a divestment. The goal is not to silence the mind, but to become its conscious investor. 13. The generosity of focus. To give someone your full attention without checking, glancing, or replying is the modern form of love. When you listen fully, you validate existence. You tell another nervous system, you're safe to be seen.
In psychology, this is known as attunement, the synchronization of emotional states between people. It builds trust faster than words or gifts. In a distracted age, presence becomes rare currency. Those who can offer it hold quiet power. 14. The wealth of enough. We chase more information the same way some chase more wealth, believing abundance will cure anxiety. But information abundance only amplifies confusion. The most successful people aren't those who know everything, they're those who know what to ignore. Minimalism of attention is the new sophistication. It's not thinking less, it's thinking clean. Freedom isn't the ability to focus on anything. It's the ability to focus on one thing fully. 15. Closing reflection. Attention shapes identity. Whatever you repeat noticing becomes your world, your beliefs, your emotional home. If you feed on outrage, you'll live in anger. If you feed on wonder, you'll live in awe. Money measures what you can buy. Attention measures who you become. Every day, the market opens at dawn. You have limited capital. Ask yourself, what deserves my mind today? Spend carefully, because the price of attention isn't just time, it's the story you'll end up living. End of Chapter 7, The Price of Attention. Chapter 8, The Wealth of Time. 1. The most democratic currency. Everyone wakes up with the same 24 hours. Yet by nightfall, their value has multiplied or dissolved depending on one question: where did your hours go? Time is the only resource distributed equally but valued unequally. You can borrow money, rebuild health, regain trust, but not a single lost hour. Economists describe time as a non-renewable asset. Psychologists describe it as the most mispriced asset. We spend it like pocket change until mortality turns it into gold. 2. The mirage of busyness. Modern life worships motion. We confuse activity with achievement, speed with significance. I'm busy has become a badge of honor, proof that we matter. But behavioral science tells a harsher truth. Chronic busyness often signals cognitive overload and avoidance. We fill calendars to dodge the discomfort of stillness, mistaking exhaustion for purpose. The late author Oliver Burkeman called this the productivity trap, working frantically to control a life that was never meant to be controlled. Busyness buys the illusion of progress. Slowness buys the experience of life. 3. The million-second experiment. If someone offered you 1 million seconds of life, you might feel rich. Yet, that's just 11 and a half days. We only realize the brevity of time when it's translated into numbers. A person who lives to 80 gets about 4,000 weeks. That's it. When you think in weeks instead of years, every Saturday suddenly weighs more. Behavioral scientists call this temporal reframing, a method of making intangible time emotionally real. It shrinks abstraction into urgency. Time feels infinite until it's counted. Then it becomes sacred. 4. The wealthy hermit. There's a story of a man who retired early after selling his startup. He bought a seaside villa, hired staff, and built a schedule designed for maximum freedom. Yet within months, he confessed to a friend, "I have everything, but I don't feel rich." He had purchased leisure, not time. Leisure is empty space on a calendar. Time is meaningful attention within it. The first is absence, the second is presence. Happiness studies show that beyond a moderate income, emotional well-being correlates less with wealth and more with perceived control over time. the feeling that your hours belong to you. Freedom isn't having nothing to do. Freedom is being able to choose what to do next. 5. The neuroscience of time perception. Our brains don't measure time linearly. They measure change and novelty. That's why childhood summers feel endless. The brain records more new experiences per day. Routine compresses perception. Surprise stretches it. This means that the fastest way to slow life down isn't by adding years, but by adding newness. Learn something, travel differently, take an unfamiliar route home. Each new neural pattern creates more memory markers, making time feel abundant. In essence, curiosity is the only time machine that works forward. 6. The investor's calendar. Financial advisors teach that wealth grows through compounding, small, consistent investments over time. The same applies to moments. 10 mindful minutes with family each evening compounds into a lifetime of closeness. 1 hour of focused work compounds into mastery. 5 distracted years compounds into regret. Psychologists call this temporal discounting, our tendency to undervalue distant rewards. We trade future satisfaction for immediate stimulation. To grow rich in time, you must invest attention with long horizons. 7. The tyranny of urgency. Emails, deadlines, pings. The modern office runs on borrowed adrenaline. Everything is urgent, but urgency is often just poor prioritization wearing a red flag. Our nervous systems evolved for immediate threats. When every notification mimics a tiger's roar, we stay in fight or flight, mistaking motion for meaning. Time wealth begins when you separate what's important from what's merely immediate. The ancient Stoics practiced a morning reflection called premeditatio malorum, imagining the day's potential disruptions in advance. It inoculated them against surprise and reclaimed agency over time. Control the morning and you control the narrative. 8. The opportunity cost of later. Later is the world's most expensive word. It purchases comfort in the present by charging interest on the future. Behavioral economics defines this as present bias, our irrational preference for smaller, sooner rewards over larger, later ones. We tell ourselves there'll be more time later, to call, to write, to rest, to begin, but later quietly becomes a debt that maturity must repay with regret. The antidote isn't urgency, it's awareness. Every yes steals minutes from something else. Say it consciously. 9. The craft of doing nothing. In Japan, there's a phrase, ma, meaning the space between. It refers to the pause that gives rhythm to music, the silence that defines sound. Western culture fears that pause, labeling it laziness. Yet neuroscience shows that during rest, the default mode network activates, the region responsible for insight and memory consolidation. Doing nothing is not waste, it's incubation. Some of history's greatest ideas, relativity, gravity, melodies, emerged not during work, but in idle moments. Time wealth requires intentional emptiness. 10. The hourglass of mortality. Confronting death is uncomfortable, but it's also clarifying. People who experience close brushes with mortality often reorder priorities overnight, not out of fear, but precision. Psychologists call this mortality salience, awareness of death that intensifies gratitude and goal alignment. When you remember that the sand is finite, you stop kicking it sideways. You start building with it instead. 11. The relationship dividend. Time spent with people compounds differently than time spent alone.
In longitudinal studies, like Harvard's 80-year grant study, the single greatest predictor of life satisfaction wasn't income, status, or health. It was quality of relationships. And relationships demand time as their primary currency. You can't automate affection or outsource presence. Moments shared are deposits that earn compound meaning long after the clock runs out. 12. The psychology of enough. One of the most liberating questions you can ask is, how much is enough? Not only in money, but in hours worked, goals chased, lists completed. Because more has no finish line, it expands with every milestone. Time affluence begins when you measure wealth not by accumulation, but alignment. Does how I spend my hours reflect who I say I am? When the answer tilts toward yes, peace appears, quietly, without announcement. 13. The quiet investor. Think of your future self as a silent partner. Every choice either deposits time into their account or steals it. Exercise, sleep, patience, deposits. Resentment, distraction, overwork, withdrawals. Most people discover too late that compounding works both ways. Neglect grows interest as reliably as care. Ask yourself daily, what will my future self thank me for? Then, pay them first. 14. The art of pacing. Runners know that finishing strong requires restraint early. Life, too, is an endurance race disguised as a sprint. Our culture glorifies acceleration, yet longevity favors pacing, deliberate seasons of output and recovery. Burnout isn't a badge, it's a bankruptcy. Sustainable wealth, financial or temporal, grows from a rhythm, not rush. Those who master pace, master life. 15. Closing reflection. Time is not money. Money can be saved, lost, or regained. Time only moves forward, silently, indifferently, beautifully. The goal is not to have more of it, but to spend it so well that you stop wishing for more. At the end of your 4,000 weeks, no one will measure your balance sheet. They'll measure your presence, the texture of your moments, the warmth of your gaze, the calm of your evenings. Ask yourself as each day begins, if today were a currency, how would I invest it? Spend generously, not in quantity, in quality. Because the true wealthy are those who live aware that every second is already enough. End of Chapter 8. The Wealth of Time. Chapter 9. The Compound Effect of Character. 1. The Silent Currency. When people think of compounding, they picture money, interest rates, investments, portfolios. But there's a quieter compounder that builds wealth in a different register. Character. Character earns invisible interest every day in trust, reputation, peace of mind. You can't calculate its yield on a spreadsheet, but it determines whether the numbers on that sheet ever mean anything. Because wealth without integrity corrodes from the inside out. 2. The hidden balance sheet. Every decision, however small, leaves an entry on an unseen ledger. When you choose honesty over convenience, patience over impulse, empathy over indifference, those are deposits. When you cut corners, rationalize, or betray your word, those are withdrawals. The balance accumulates slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day you find yourself either rich in credibility or bankrupt in trust. Behavioral scientists call this the reputation feedback loop. Our actions shape how others see us, which in turn influences how we see ourselves. Over time, this loop hardens into identity. So character doesn't just predict behavior,
it creates it. 3. The experiment in the elevator. In 1969, a social psychologist named Stanley Milgram conducted an odd experiment. He placed Confederates in an elevator and instructed them to all face the back wall. When an unsuspecting passenger entered, something strange happened. Almost every time, the person turned around too, facing the wrong way, simply because everyone else was. Milgram was studying social conformity, the instinct to fit in, even when it defies logic. It revealed how fragile individual character can be when exposed to collective pressure. Moral strength, then, is not defiance for its own sake. It's the courage to face the right direction when everyone else turns away. Character compounds not in moments of applause, but in moments of quiet resistance. 4. The small habits of integrity. Most people imagine character as a grand virtue, the heroic act, the defining stand. But in reality, it's microscopic. It's returning the extra change the cashier forgot. It's finishing the boring part of the job no one sees. It's admitting, I don't know. Behavioral psychology calls this micro-consistency. Small, consistent actions build the self-image that sustains bigger ones. Like compound interest, integrity grows silently, until one day, the gap between who pretends and who persists becomes an abyss. 5. The wealth of trust. Trust is the social version of capital. It takes years to build and seconds to lose. In markets, its loss triggers crashes. In relationships, collapses. Economists who study behavioral contracts found that trust reduces transaction costs, deals close faster, teams collaborate better, and stress declines. Because when trust is high, complexity decreases. When it's low, life becomes a maze of verification and suspicion. A reputation for reliability, then, is one of the most valuable assets you can own. It's portable, interest-bearing, and recession-proof. 6. The mirror of self-deception. Every human being tells themselves stories to preserve self-esteem. Psychologists call this the moral licensing effect. When we do something good, we subconsciously grant ourselves permission to bend the rules later. For example, a person donates to charity, then cheats on taxes, rationalizing it as balance. An executive justifies harsh behavior because it's for the team. But each rationalization chips away at the mental mirror. And when that mirror breaks, even success loses reflection. Character wealth requires brutal honesty, not with others first, but with oneself. 7. The marshmallow lesson. The famous Stanford marshmallow experiment tested children's ability to delay gratification. Eat one marshmallow now or wait for two later. Decades later, follow-up studies found a correlation. Those who waited tended to have better life outcomes. But the real lesson wasn't self-control. It was trust. Children who believed the experimenter would keep their promise are far more likely to wait. Character, then, is relational. It grows in the soil of reliability, both given and received. A society rich in trust compounds prosperity. One poor in it compounds fear. 8. The emotional ROI of character. Integrity doesn't just build external wealth. It stabilizes internal chemistry. Neuroscience shows that deception and guilt activate the brain's anterior cingulate cortex, the same region involved in physical pain. Living against one's values literally hurts. Conversely, when we act in alignment with our principles, the dopaminergic system rewards us with quiet satisfaction.
Not the spike of excitement, but the calm of coherence. It's the dopamine of peace, not pleasure. That's why people who live ethically tend to sleep better. Their nervous systems aren't negotiating with themselves all night. 9. The crisis dividend. Every crisis tests what compound growth has been building all along. When the market crashes, the ethical investor doesn't panic. When betrayal hits, the honest person doesn't crumble because their foundation wasn't built on approval, but principle. In behavioral economics, this is called emotional resilience through value alignment. It's the psychological dividend of living congruently. The world cannot promise you immunity from loss, but it can guarantee one thing: you will always face yourself. Character ensures that when that meeting happens, you won't flinch. 10. The invisible mentor. Some of the most influential people in your life may never meet you. Their books, stories, or quiet examples ripple across decades. Morgan Housel writes, "Your personal experiences make up maybe 0.0001% of what's happened in the world, but maybe 80% of how you think the world works." Character passes through that filter like inheritance, not genetically, but behaviorally. Every moment you act with integrity, you become someone's data point, someone's reason to still believe. The compound effect of character is generational. 11. The cost of betrayal. When character breaks, wealth vanishes faster than physics allows. Think of scandals that wiped out fortunes overnight, not because the math failed, but the morals did. Enron, Theranos, countless names that once commanded billions erased by a single truth. Credibility is the only currency that doesn't forgive inflation. In behavioral economics, this is known as trust collapse. It spreads faster than contagion because betrayal burns longer than loss. Money can rebuild walls. Only character can rebuild bridges.
12. The practice of accountability. Integrity isn't a trait, it's a practice. It requires systems, not slogans. Leaders who create accountability structures, feedback loops, transparent decisions, regular reflection, maintain character not through willpower, but through design. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman once said, "We're blind to our own blindness." Accountability is how we borrow the eyes of others to keep seeing straight. A wise person builds guardrails before the cliff, not after the fall. 13. The quietest flex. There's a strange paradox. The deeper your character grows, the less you need to prove it. You stop performing goodness and start embodying it. It's like compound interest again. The longer it matures, the less it needs noise. Real confidence doesn't announce itself, it emanates. Real wealth doesn't boast, it sustains. And real character doesn't defend itself, it's too busy living truthfully. 14. The second-hand effect. Character compounds beyond you in those who watch, imitate, and inherit your standards. Children, colleagues, strangers, all are quietly calibrating what's acceptable based on what you tolerate. You are, whether you like it or not, a market signal of morality. Every act of integrity nudges the collective equilibrium slightly upward. When multiplied across a culture, these small ripples form economic consequences. Less fraud, more cooperation, more shared growth. Character, it turns out, is both private virtue and public infrastructure. The final equation. The true formula of wealth is not money times time times return.
It's character times time times consequence. Because everything compounds. Habits, trust, choices, love. The question isn't whether you're compounding. It's what direction you're doing it in. In the end, your net worth will fade, but your moral worth will echo. And, like compound interest, those echoes never stop growing. They just change ownership. So build slow, stay honest when it's expensive, do good when it's unseen, because that's the one investment guaranteed to outperform every market, and the only one you can take with you. End of chapter 9. The compound effect of character. Chapter 10. The quiet endgame. 1. The last question. There comes a moment, not on a balance sheet, not in a promotion, not in applause, when you realize life has quietly shifted from accumulating to accounting. You stop asking, how much can I make? And start wondering, what did it all mean? This is the psychology of endings, the point where wealth, ambition, and identity converge into reflection. Economists study utility, the satisfaction derived from goods. But psychology studies meaning utility, the satisfaction derived from stories. And every human being, no matter how rich, is ultimately left holding one: the story of how they spent their life.
2. The mirage of arrival. We live much of life chasing a mirage called enough. We tell ourselves that peace sits just beyond the next raise, the next house, the next milestone. But every time we arrive, the horizon shifts a little farther. Behavioral economists call this the hedonic treadmill, our tendency to adapt quickly to new levels of comfort and then crave more. It's the cruelest trick of the mind, progress that never feels like progress. The antidote isn't renouncing ambition, it's redefining arrival. Because the truth is, you never really arrive, you only realize you were already home. 3. The investor who sold too late. There's a story of a seasoned investor named Peter who spent decades mastering markets. He could read volatility like a language, predict downturns like weather. But one day, in his 70s, he confessed something to his daughter. I spent my life learning when to sell stocks. I never learned when to stop working. Peter had achieved financial independence, but not psychological independence. He was rich, but directionless. Proof that money solves external problems faster than internal ones. Wealth buys you freedom from things. Wisdom buys you freedom for things. The end game is realizing which you've been pursuing. 4. The science of letting go. Behavioral science teaches that loss triggers stronger emotions than gain, a principle called loss aversion. We cling not because what we hold is valuable, but because surrender feels like pain. Yet all fulfillment ultimately requires some form of surrender, of control, ego, or narrative. Letting go isn't giving up, it's giving space for something truer to enter. In neuroscience, when we release attachment, the default mode network quiets, the chatter that loops identity stories. That silence is not emptiness, it's peace, unmasked. 5. The success delusion. Success, as society defines it, is visible. We measure it in numbers, status, and symbols. But meaning hides in what cannot be measured. The warmth in someone's voice when you enter a room, the relief of being known, the nights you sleep without unfinished apologies. Behavioral psychologists describe this as intrinsic motivation, doing something for its inherent satisfaction rather than external reward. People driven by intrinsic values, curiosity, connection, purpose, report greater well-being across every income bracket.
Success impresses, meaning fulfills. 6. The portfolio of regret. Harvard researchers studying end-of-life reflections found a striking pattern. People rarely regret what they lost. They regret what they postponed. They wish they had been more, not owned more, that they had said I love you sooner, that they had forgiven faster, that they had left meetings early and stayed at dinner longer. Regret is the emotional receipt for time spent without awareness. It's not punishment, it's feedback. It tells you what to do differently while the clock still ticks. Because the ultimate investment skill isn't prediction, it's attention. 7. The paradox of enough. There's a moment in every accumulation curve when the return on more turns negative. More money brings complexity. More possessions bring maintenance. More recognition brings pressure. And yet, walking away feels impossible because the brain's reward circuitry adapts faster than wisdom can intervene. That's why philosophers from Seneca to the Dalai Lama echoed the same truth. Wealth is not having everything you want, but wanting less than everything you have. Enough is not a number. It's a decision, one that compounds serenity instead of status. 8. The fragile nature of legacy. Legacy is often misunderstood as what people remember about you. But behavioral science reframes it more subtly. Legacy is behavioral inheritance. The habits, principles, and emotional tone others unconsciously adopt from your example. You don't need a foundation or a building named after you. You need one person who behaves a little kinder because of how you lived. That is compound interest in its purest, most invisible form. 9. The loneliness of arrival. Reaching the top of any pursuit can be profoundly isolating, not because it's cold, but because few people understand the altitude. Athletes, executives, artists, many describe the summit as disorienting. When there's no higher peak, there's no direction left. Psychologists call this the arrival fallacy, the disillusionment that follows achievement. The brain, conditioned for striving, panics when the chase ends. That's why the wisest learn to replace achievement with alignment, asking not what's next, but what feels true. The shift from ambition to authenticity marks the quiet start of wisdom. 10. The currency of stillness. When everything external has been achieved, the only thing left to master is stillness. And yet stillness is not inactivity. It's precision. It's doing one thing completely, without mental residue from the 1,000 things undone. In meditation studies, long-term practitioners show reduced activity in the amygdala, the brain's threat detector. Stillness isn't spiritual escapism. It's neurological efficiency. Peace, it turns out, is not the absence of noise. It's the mastery of focus amid it. 11. The grace of perspective. Imagine watching your life from a drone view, seeing all your triumphs and failures as dots on a single line. From that altitude, the panic of any moment dissolves into pattern. This is what psychologists call temporal distancing, mentally stepping back from immediacy to see continuity. It reduces anxiety, restores proportion, and rebalances gratitude. Because the truth is, we're all just visitors, brief sparks in an endless current. And once you see that, you stop trying to outshine the universe. You start trying to illuminate your corner of it. 12. The arithmetic of grace. Money obeys math. Life obeys grace. Grace is the margin between what you planned and what happened, between who you were and who you're becoming. Some investments fail, some relationships fracture, some dreams never materialize, and yet you endure. That endurance itself becomes a kind of wealth, the quiet dividend of acceptance. In behavioral therapy, acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means non-resistance. It's choosing to flow instead of fight. The end game is not control. It's communion with the imperfection of things. 13. The final investment. At some point, all accounts settle. Your assets distribute, your achievements fade, your name becomes a story. But one investment remains active long after you're gone. The emotional yield of how you made others feel. People might forget what you said or built or earned, but they will remember if they felt safe in your presence. That's the ultimate compound interest, paid not in currency, but in comfort. 14. The psychology of peace. Peace isn't the absence of ambition, it's the alignment of ambition with meaning. It's when the energy that once fueled achievement now fuels appreciation. Behavioral science calls this goal reorientation, the mind's adaptive shift from striving for growth to striving for connection and legacy. It's a natural, healthy evolution, one that signals not decline, but maturity. When you stop chasing time, it slows down for you. 15. The quiet endgame. At the end, wealth returns to its simplest definition. Having what you need, when you need it, with people you love, doing things that matter. The rest is noise. The rest is narrative. The truest form of abundance is being able to sit in a quiet room, breathe evenly, and whisper, "This was enough." Not perfect, not infinite, just enough, and deeply so. Because the real endgame isn't retirement, it's arrival. And arrival at its most peaceful feels less like applause and more like silence finally making sense. End of chapter 10. The Quiet Endgame.